No, wait, we're not ready yet. Well, now we're about as ready as we'll ever be to talk about this book. I mean, I should have known better by this point. Isn't this always the case with a new Red Rising book? I convince myself I'm prepared only to discover I am, oh, so woefully not. No, never emotionally prepared for a Red Rising book. I'm not even sure where to start. I mean, I guess I could start with just how excited I was for this book. You see, maybe it's just me, but I love a good revolution/rebellion story. I mean, hello, Star Wars has been banging those out for how many decades now, and I still eat it up like it's the best thing in the world. Even while acknowledging it can often be a little on the side of simple, black and white, esoteric, good guy versus bad guy. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, mind. When it comes to books, I like to have things a little more morally gray. I want my protagonists incredibly flawed, and to do things that make me want to wring their necks. I want antagonists whose perspectives I can understand, and who make me constantly question my own morality if and when I perhaps agree with them, even if on the smallest of things. So that's why, when something's just tied up neatly with a bow and has no implications of far-reaching socioeconomic political consequences at the end, I'm left going, okay, but what else? What comes next?
What comes next? You've been freed. Do you know how hard it is to lead?
That Hamilton reference was 110% necessary, don't at me. You don't just break something for it to magically put itself back together. In the case of Morningstar, despite the relatively triumphant end of the novel, it was an end with a cost. And it was also an end that hinted at difficulty in the future for the characters who were left alive. After all, if you break an empire, you bloody damn buy it. And buy it our characters absolutely have. 10 years on, we see the biggest questions being asked about this new Solar Republic are, does it even really work? And what exactly has risen from the ashes of the burnt empire? That empire, by the way, that's still sort of fighting back on the inner planets. And so what's interesting for me about Iron Gold is that it's not so much the start of a new trilogy as a continuation of the story that was begun in Red Rising. And it's a continuation I'm 100% here for. These are issues I love seeing addressed in a revolution/rebellion story. I want to watch my flawed faves, you know, the ones who didn't die, deal with problems that grate against their very being, that force them to make a lot of difficult and in many cases very stupid fucking decisions. Decisions, mind, that are completely in line with their characters as we've come to know them in the past 3 books. Which means if you're like me, you're going to spend a lot of Iron Gold kind of internally screeching and wanting to wring various characters' necks while also then slapping some sense into them. 10 years on, and they're definitely still themselves, if not a little older and in some ways a little wiser. Darrow's having to deal with the fact that he is a man of war and is meant to be in a time of peace. And we're not even sure if he would recognize peace if it looked him straight in the face. He's still hot-headed, he doesn't always think things through before leaping right into the fire, and as always, every single one of his actions has far-reaching consequences. Darrow has always been some kind of Achilles. Yes, I'm pretentious and use that saying as opposed to Achilles, which is the Romanization. I'm sorry, I'm a super nerd. He burns and rages so bright that he drowns out everything around him, causing a plethora of collateral damage. You probably remember in my talk on Morningstar, I said, it's totally understandable why the Golds see Darrow as a terrorist because he's a terrorist with a huge ass body count in his wake. And while Darrow certainly bears every single one of the deaths and the losses, it doesn't always make him stop. In fact, it almost never does. He thinks that what he's doing is right, even when all of the people around him are telling him otherwise, or attempt to steer him in a different direction. Much of the novel is about Darrow's own nature working against him in a time of relative peace. He's a warrior and a fighter, which spells a lot of trouble when he has to navigate the politicking of the Solar Republic he helped to found, and also just to recognize it's peacetime. Of course, that was always Mustang's strength, and her attempts to work out what she has left 10 years on from the Rising are so compelling. And my one little complaint, and it's a wee complaint, it's a very small complaint, is that we don't get more of Mustang in these books. I mean, what we get is absolutely fantastic, and Mustang continues to be one of the best characters of this saga, but I wish we'd gotten a little more time with her, especially given the events of the story and the fact that we get to spend a lot of quality time with her and Darrow's son, Pax. He's such a precious small bean, oh my god. He's so precious, guys. I have great hope and great anxiety for this child, and he grew so much over the course of Iron Gold alone that I felt like such a proud parent by its end. Like, I was so proud of the small bean. And also, by the way, Severo's daughter, Electra, is a bloody damn badass, and I forever want her and Pax as some sort of, like, team. Like, the two of them, it's great. It's so great. So, of course, as you probably guessed, Severo and Victor are backed, and it's really in Severo that I think we see the most development. Here's a man who's always been on the wild side. A delightfully vicious shit, who spat in the face of so much of the Gold Society and their expected manners of behavior and decorum. And, like, we love him for it. He cuts through all those masks of decorum and all, actually, the bullshit that defined Gold. He was also a young man on the extreme. He was the perfect way to temper Darrow by being the living embodiment of going way too far. And yet, in Iron Gold, while Severo has certainly lost none of his edge and his bite and his just being crude self, we see how fatherhood has, in a way, softened him in the best ways. We see him thinking beyond just his own delight in the art and sport of battle, slaughter, and war. And his most poignant moments are when he talks about his children and how he wants nothing more to ensure that they do not grow up the way he did, which was without a father and having to try and avenge their father. Just pardon me, my heart is melting over here. But like I said, these are still the characters we know, love, and frequently want to throttle. Because there are some seriously costly decisions made in Iron Gold, and the consequences of these decisions are still unfolding, as we'll likely see in the later two books of the rest of this saga. Hell, even the actions of the past are still echoing forth their consequences far out across the solar system. And that's where we find Lysander Aulun and Cassius Au Bellona. They are out on the Rim, a place we really only glimpsed in Morningstar, and to which I was so stoked to return. Like, I was so glad we were going back to the Rim, because the Moon Lords are, like, seemingly cut from a different cloth when compared to the other gold families that we meet on Mars and Luna, and I guess what they would call the interior. And these differences are what make them so fascinating, because the Moon Lords is a different history and kind of a different culture just due to their place in the solar system and the kind of in-world mythos, or history really, of the Moon Lords versus the interior. And yet, even with all of these nuances and all these differences, we also see the similarities. They are gold. And they behave as I suppose we would imagine the Iron Golds of the past would. I found Lysander's story one of the most emotionally heartbreaking, frustrating, and fascinating. Because here's a 20-year-old man who's lived his entire first half of his life being told he would inherit everything, that he would, in effect, one day rule the world. You can't imagine that this didn't affect him, especially as those were the earliest, most formative years of his life. And then especially when suddenly, in but a moment, all of that is ripped away, and everything and everyone you knew and loved is dead and gone. Your entire life philosophy is suddenly null and void. And you're told that not only is it that, it's wrong, it's incorrect. That's a lot of heavy shit to lay on the shoulders of a 10-year-old, even one that's gold. And while I love, and sometimes hate, Cassius, he may not have been the best choice to care for Lysander. Sure, of course, hindsight, 2020. So we can now see all of the cracks in the foundation of what Cassius was attempting to teach Lysander, but I think it really comes down to the fact that Cassius still needed to repair himself. Cassius was our kind of dark mirror image of Darrow. He's someone who was broken down from the inside out, who craved honor in an honorless world, and who ultimately had to make the difficult choice of turning against everything he knew and everything he thought he believed in. It cost him, not just obviously physically and everything else, it cost him psychologically, and it shows. He was a broken young man who ended up taking a young child under his wing and attempted to mold him before being able to look inside himself and then repair himself. As a result, we see how this relationship over the course of 10 years between Lysander and Cassius has frayed to the point that as Lysander himself even says, he's outgrown Cassius. And so within this, Lysander's journey is ultimately one of self-discovery and kind of self-affirmation. He doesn't really know who he is, and throughout the novel, he constantly struggles with the kind of disparate parts of himself. Do I necessarily agree with the decisions that he makes along the way, especially in the back third of the novel? No, not at all. I think they're frustrating and stupid, and they piss me off, and I'm so mad at him. But I 100% understand his perspective. I understand why he's making the choices he does and why he thinks they are the kind of like esoterically right decisions by the end of the novel. I wanted to shake him, but I could see how ultimately his boyhood has been fully shattered. As Pierce Brown writes, all that was left of him is dead and the life of the man must begin. Side note, if you're like me, God damn it, Cassius, you managed to reclaim your honor with me, I swear. You were ultimately a good man. You made the right choice. I wept buckets for you. And of course, I'm also just saying I fully don't believe anything unless you give me a fucking body, so until I see a body, I'm going to have a glimmer of denial. Cassius. Also, space Vikings, guys. Fucking space Vikings! Now, Lyria is our first truly new perspective of the 4 POV characters within Iron Gold. We've not met her in any way prior to this novel, nor have we even heard about her tangentially. And hers is perhaps the most important perspective of all the 4 POV characters, especially as it pertains to the big question, what happens when you break the Empire? Because it is those on the ground, those who are at the bottom and who are the most disenfranchised, who are most affected. And that's both positively or negatively. They will be the most affected. Lyria is a character who saw our previous heroes as just that. These heroes. Darrow was the father, liberator, warlord, slave king, reaper. You know, he had all these names. Mustang was Virginia the Lionheart. Several as Howlers were probably like holy knights. These people, these terribly flawed humans who we as readers, know very intimately and have grown to love and who we know are just terribly flawed human beings, are made out into being like living gods in the eyes of the most exploited and abused of the system that was the society. The danger of that being, what happens when your gods are revealed to be wholly human and they disappoint you? That's a really tough pill to swallow, and so 10 years on from Morningstar, Lyria's perspective shows us how ultimately few things have really changed for the people on the ground level. Yes, the kind of ignorance and childlike blind acceptance of the society has been stripped away, but in that knowledge of their own self-worth, the low colors, especially the reds, also know all too keenly that their situation has not necessarily improved in any dramatic way. It's barely improved at all. Okay, they're not slaves, but they're still doing menial labor. They have no real skills that could allow them to rise up.
Rise up when you're living on your knees, you rise up. Tell your brother that he's gotta rise up. Tell your sister that she's gotta rise up.
Again, that Hamilton reference was necessary, don't at me. So that we see that the danger of being the living god who, rescues these low colors, and yet does not immediately give them something akin to paradise, or is failing in trying to create a system that really helps them, means that these low colors are going to harbor a lot of resentment. It's absolutely understandable resentment and very justified, but it is also resentment and anger nonetheless, and if you don't deal with it, you have problems. And Lyria is angry. Her anger could at times rival Darrow's for its intensity, though she's certainly better at reeling herself back as opposed to taking physical action as a result of her anger. Lyria holds everything in, and the pain of all that anger and that resentment and that loss just festers within her, and it is so visceral and so palpable within the novel. I'm not gonna lie, it took me a little while at first to fully gel with Lyria, because I think it's not always easy to love a character who's angry at all of your precious faves, even while also completely understanding and sympathizing with her feelings, because yeah, she's right, you get it, but they're your faves. I get it, I truly do. And so I did gel with her eventually, and I think her perspective is the most vital to the entirety of the narrative, because she helps to force the reader to re-examine all of our faves' decisions. Because now we see how these decisions have affected everybody else over the course of 10 years. And of course, watching Lyria see the golds and the rising and all the people within it as just that human, having her realize that these people are just people, they're not these gods, and that they're terribly flawed people, is so powerful an arc. across the entirety of the novel. And her final thoughts in Iron Gold, where she understands she can't hold on to the pain and that letting go of her anger doesn't in any way diminish or spit on the memories of those that she's lost in the wake of the rising and the hardships that endured as its result. Like, oh my god, that like instead of being angry about her past, she can have hope for the future. It's so beautifully powerful a sentiment, and I am not okay that she was cut off in the middle of that beautiful epiphany. Like, I'm fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. I'm fine. But I will say that Lyria's POV really proved to me that Cavax-Au, Telemanus, and his beautiful fox Sophocles are heroes we don't deserve, and they must be protected at all bloody damn cost. Do you hear me? I refuse to lose more Telemanuses. I refuse. Also, I'm pretty certain Harmony showed up, and that bitch. Okay, look, I know that Pierce Brown is a miracle worker and that he's like a wizard and he can make me care for people that I don't normally care about, but like, I really don't think there's anything you can do that would ever make me feel sympathy for Harmony again. That train has long since left the station. And so finally, we need to talk about Ephraim, a character we kind of met tangentially in Morning Star. He was the fiance of our dearly departed and sorely missed Trig T. Nakamura. I'm still not over that. And so he's the brother-in-law of Holiday T. Nakamura, who actually thankfully returns in Iron Gold and is frankly one of the most level-headed characters in the whole fucking thing, and also proves to be one of our beautifully kind of connective threads throughout the various perspectives. She connects 3 of the 4 perspectives in some way. Ephraim is another character who holds onto his rage and his pain. He's become disillusioned with the Rising and has long since abandoned it, and we completely understand why. It has cost him so much, and he's seen very little change where he can feel good about it. And so like Lyria, he may at first be a hard character to connect with, for while we understand his pain and we feel it keenly, Ephraim behaves in absolutely condemnable fashion as a result of this pain. He makes a decision to take a job that, once we realize what the job is, made me want to beat him to a bloody pulp. Yes, I pitied him. Yes, I sympathized with his feelings. And yes, I completely, understood why he was pissed and was with him about being pissed. But that does not make kidnapping Pax and Electra, 2 completely innocent children, okay. It doesn't make holding them responsible for the results of their parents' actions okay. Children should not be held guilty for their sins, actual or perceived, of their forebears. Let's get that clear. So I like Ephraim, but oh my god, he takes this job and I wanted to kill him. He made me so angry. So angry. But Ephraim did at least give me the character of Volga, and wow. What can I say about Volga? I am full-blown going to lead the Volga Protection Squad because this sweet bean of a small, air quotes, small, obsidian is wonderful and beautiful and deserves to be protected at all costs. And her calling out Ephraim as a monster for what he's done and for calling out his shitty behavior towards her and other people as a result of his pain and just being an all-around beautiful soul is my goddamn aesthetic, and I love her. Please don't take her from me, Pierce Brown. Please. I will beg and plead and cry and bribe you with things if necessary, but if I must, just please don't take her from me. What else can I say about Iron Gold? It absolutely wrecked me emotionally, but this isn't that unusual given how this series tends to always make me feel, and honestly my track record with Pierce Brown is that he traumatizes me. I am forever in a state of high anxiety with these books, terrified to keep going because of how relentless the books are, but also terrified to stop reading because I feel a physical need to keep going and essentially inhale the beautiful, glorious prose of this story. It's not too often I find books, let alone multiple books in a series, that tell a consistently breathtaking and intriguing story with a wide, diverse range of characters that I love, I hate, everything in between, who I constantly can change my opinion on, who sometimes I love them but I want to kill them, who just make me angry and yet I still root for them, and oh my god, they are just also beautifully flawed, tragically human, and yet also within all of this, these books address a plethora of prescient and thoughtful themes. So Iron Gold, it is more than just a worthy continuation of the series. It's a daring and a very necessary one. We broke the Empire, and now we've bought it, whether or not we like it.
thanks for watching me ramble today. If you'd like to see more from me, go ahead and click that button with my face on it. It'll take you to my channel where I ramble about a whole lot of different things. Got some thoughts of your own? Go ahead and leave them down in the comments. And make sure that if you want to see more ramblings from me, you click that little subscribe button. That's it for me today, you guys, so until next time, cheers.